Michelle's here, and we're going to just take some questions from the audience, and I'll introduce you if you want to say a little bit about your film first before we get into the questions. Yeah, okay?
Okay.
Okay, all right. So Reza Shirazi is an urbanist, researcher, and professor in sustainable urban development at the School of Built Environment, Oxford Brookes University. He is an expert in sociocultural sustainability, neighborhood planning and design, citizen participation, urban justice, and discourse studies. He has done extensive research on different regions and cities in Europe, North America, the Middle East, and North Africa. Reza was a visiting professor at the Institute of Urban and Regional Development at UC Berkeley from 2018 to 2020, and principal investigator of the EU-funded research project Unjust Neighborhoods, Socio-Spatial Justice in Urban Neighborhoods. During his stay at UC Berkeley, he directed the film Never Surrender that documents the community fight for environmental justice. So thank you, everybody. Let's go ahead and welcome him. Thank you for being here, Reza. I hope you can still hear me.
Speak again. It was broken for a while.
Okay, so can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, thank you so much for being here. And if you need the question repeated, I guess I don't know if you could hear me better. I don't know, but anyway.
We can hear you. We can hear you.
But can he hear me better than? I don't know.
We don't know how the room is like.
Yeah, where is the mic?
If you have to repeat the questions, that's okay, right?
Okay. Oh, we do have a mic.
Yeah, try that. Just try to flip that up and then talk to that.
All right, I'm gonna take it to people who have questions, I suppose. Oh, Reza, you're gonna talk a little bit first. So you just give us a little insight on what you're doing and how the film came about and that kind of thing first.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you, Heidi, for having me and organizing this event and film screening. It's also nice to see Michelle here. Hi, Michelle. After a while, yeah. So you have watched the film. It is about the fight for environmental justice in Bayview-Hunters Point. And just to provide a little bit of background, so why I did this film. I was at UC Berkeley, as Heidi briefly mentioned, as a visiting professor to do some research around urban justice and environmental justice. And my case study was Bayview-Hunters Point. And I was there from January 2018 to January 2020. And so it was a very classic research, but I had also this idea or intention to make a documentary film for the first time. So I'm not really a documentary filmmaker, but I have made one. And this is also an interesting journey, how I managed to make this documentary film. And it happened because I was aware of the power of the documentary film, both as a tool for doing research and also, most importantly, as a tool for communication with the community. And this is the very important part of it, because it is always one of the issues of researchers when they are working with communities, because they are doing a lot of work in community, they are learning from them, they are taking data from them. And it is also an ethical question, how researchers are going to contribute to the community and how they want to give it back to the community. And I believe that making a documentary film is a very good way to thank the community and also to communicate with the community. And I'm also very happy that I made this documentary film, because I see that I have had just for example, last week I had one film screening in Romania, in Bucharest. I had another film screening in the Belgrade. Wow. And I'm really happy that I see that my documentary film, which basically reflects the fight of the community, is screened all over the world. And I'm spreading their work, their struggle, and their fight. And it makes me really happy. So I have had probably more than 30 different screenings from Canada up to different places, all over
Woo!
to South
That's
Africa.
amazing.
It's really, really very, very happy. And just I make it very brief. How I did this documentary film, I just started it without knowing what I'm going to do with the filming and recording. I just went to the community, and Michelle can confirm that I was almost everywhere that there was something happening around Bayview-Hunters Point issues in the task force meetings, in community hearings and town hall hearings. So I started recording them. And at the same time that I was educating myself how to do a documentary film through learning about the technical issues and also different modes of documentary filmmaking. And after a while that I had probably 60 hours of recordings, then I had the editor of the film, and then we sat together, and it took us around 6 months to start to cutting it and making a narrative out of the film and doing the edits and finishing it. So it took around 6 months, and I am very happy with the results, and I hope that you also enjoyed the film.
Well, thank you so much. Okay, so I'm gonna, bring the microphone to anybody that has a question. So can we get any questions? Okay, so I've been told that you should hold the microphone more towards your chin.
Microphone is the theme.
Hello, can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Actually, maybe I can go up to the computer. I think that's where the microphone is coming here.
Okay, okay.
Yeah, sorry. I just.
Yeah.
I don't want to make it too hard.
Obviously, I'm not the expert.
Hello, is this better?
No,
No?
might yourself be
Oh,
better.
never mind. It's the microphone. Sorry.
Okay, try it again. Just talk really loud.
Hi, so it seems like you have a lot of experience around the world with this type of environmental project. I was just curious, are there any particularly unique challenges that the residents of Bayview-Hunters Point face in regards to their situation and activism?
The environmental justice case have a lot of similarities as far as but of course there are some peculiarities. It would be better than me. But from my perspective, my observation was that the case was different for a couple of reasons. For example, one of the things that also really inspired me a lot was the tradition of activism in Bayview-Hunters Point. And I could also, because I went to the history of activism in Bayview-Hunters Point, and this five female basically activists that starting from probably 1960s, 1970s, they were fighting for housing issues around housing, and there was a very strong tradition of activism in Bayview-Hunters Point that can be traced back to 1960s, 1970s, and it also continued over the years. The other thing is also very particular to Bayview-Hunters Point is that it is radioactively contaminated land. So this radioactive issue, besides this chemical contamination that probably is more common in other places, but it is also radioactively contaminated, and it makes this very, very complicated. And the other thing probably is the size of the project. So it is really a huge project, and in terms of the size of the project that has been affected, and also the size of the development that they are going to do there. And the other thing probably is the complicated power structure related to the case. So it took me really, I would say, 6-7 months just to understand a little bit who is doing what, because there are a lot of agencies involved in that, from federal agencies, EPA to Navy, up to the state agencies, up to the local agencies. There are a lot of agents involved in that, and there are a lot of actors. So that just it is very complicated. And the other thing, so there are a lot of things, but just to mention a little bit of a number of them, and to finish it, is that it's also a long history, so it makes it very complicated because just the development of this Bayview-Hunters shipyard started from 1990s. The planning and making an agreement with the Navy so that the Navy is responsible for cleaning the land and the city is responsible for developing plans. And it is 1990, it is around 3 decades almost. So it is, and a lot of things has happened there that makes the case very, very complicated and a very, very unique case.
Thank you very
There
much.
are many other aspects, but these are the items that just came to my mind.
I think what we'll do is take your question, but let's also have Michelle maybe respond to the question too.
Hi there. So I'm a biologist. I'm interested in, I've got layers and layers and layers of questions, but I'm going to focus on one. One of the things that they said they did was they were doing the surface sampling. So they're going to be testing with between 6 and 12 inches down, is what I'm understanding. And I'm pulling up maps and looking at them. A lot of plants can function as bioaccumulators. And for that matter, when I was really small, we were living in the Terrace Heights neighborhood, which is not too far from there. And, you know, kids dig. And I'm thinking, so yes, you test these couple of layers, but you've got kids out in the yard digging, you have plants bringing things up from the subsoil. I'm just wondering about these methods, Michelle or Reza.
If I think people, probably Michelle can talk a little bit more about that because she's expert in that. But I'm not a biologist, but my basic understanding is also makes the case very ridiculous because just going a couple of inches deep and saying that everything is clean, and we know that the dirt can transfer, and kids from the ground, and the plants can also bring the dirt from below to the up, and the landscape may change over the years, and all these things are true, are really valid points that the community members and activists have made, but Michelle can definitely talk more about it.
So this film is actually about activism and community participatory planning. We actually, in almost every one of the meetings that Reza filmed, brought this up because number one, gamma radiation is very narrow, and the types of research that went on there is very broad. So the community has been demanding scanning and soil sampling for alpha, beta radiation as well. Beta tends to be the most harmful to human and mammal types of radiation exposure, and we know it's there, and the Navy refuses to scan for it. So let me give you a quick background on how this process has been working. As Reza said, there are several federal, state, and municipal agencies that are supposed to be monitoring this site, that are charged with monitoring health and safety of the environment. Unfortunately, the way this particular development and deal was negotiated, San Francisco's health department and California Department of Public Health have oversight and lead status as agencies for all of the government agencies, and they all go through those two health departments. One of the people that you saw speaking in Reza's film is the contact for San Francisco Department of Public Health. She was being questioned by our supervisors. And I have to tell you what she said. So number one, I'm a biochemist, environmental justice activist, toxics reduction specialist. And my biggest concern with the shipyard is all the other stuff that really can screw with your health that we know was left behind in the soil and nobody's checking for, and nobody is regulating, and nobody is demanding that they clean those things up. When questioning the health department, directly on all of those other things in front of several other executive directors for nonprofits. This woman stopped the meeting to say, well, Michelle is a scientist, you guys, so she knows things that you guys don't have to be concerned with. And she's asking really hard questions about these things that, yeah, they might cause harm to human health, but we're focusing on radiation because it's really easy to detect. All you do is you run a little cart down the street, and if it beeps, that means there's something there, and if it doesn't, it's clean. It's really cheap for us to do. It's not very expensive, and it's very quick. So this is what we focus on, not that other stuff she's talking about. Therefore, they're checking for gamma radiation on a golf cart with a little cart standing behind it with a Geiger counter, and if it beeps, they stop and say there might be something here. And that's what they're calling scanning for us right now. They're refusing to do soil sampling. We know that you have to do soil sampling. We know that the water table is very high, which means tide comes in, tide goes out, it rains, it doesn't rain. All of these things cause harm, right? When I say water table is very high, it doesn't rain, that means the soil dries up and the wind takes the topsoil. The wind can take the topsoil up to 6 inches very easily in the drought conditions that we have right now. And then what was below detection is on the surface now. So let me tell you about the covenants in the leases and the actual deeds for the property that are on parcel A. These covenants say that you cannot plant in the soil at all. You can't plant. The landscaping that is there has to remain there. The covenants say that you cannot eat anything grown in the soil that's there. You have to get special permission from the city to have a planter box in order to grow your own plants for food. The lady from the health department that I was referring to when we were discussing in this forum of executive directors from Bayview-Hunters Point nonprofits, and I was questioning her, she turned to the rest of the people in the room and said, in fact, to your point, she said, let me explain what we're talking about with these units. The land there is safe to live on, but it is not safe for your kid or your dog to dig in. Do you know a dog or a baby that doesn't get on their hands and knees and dig and lick? So is this a safe place for you to be raising a family? I mean, and this is literally the narrative. It's actually written down of San Francisco's health department. This place is safe. It's not a threat, but it's not safe for your kids or your dog to dig in the soil.
Wow.
And by the way, they're not going to dig below 12 inches, but so realistically, that's a great question because we have on the record through the health department, through Department of Toxic Substances, through California Health Department, through the Navy, through Region 9 EPA, through Cal EPA, that this soil is not safe, that they added topsoil and 4 different layers of permeable barriers to an area that has a shifting climate. One of the reasons this site was so attractive for that kind of laboratory, as I stated in the film, is that the environment is so movable and interconnected, and we already knew wind patterns and water flow patterns all the way up to the Marin Headlands, all the way down to Moffett Field. And so we could actually see how long it would take for something to contaminate the entire Bay Area and use those models to extrapolate to other urban areas that had a broad footprint. So, yeah, so the stuff that's there might be polluting the entire rest of the Bay Area for 300,000 years,
right.
just to let you guys know.
Right.
There is a landfill there that has an open bottom so that part of the cleaning system is actually for stuff to slowly leak out back into the bay, slowly, and then follow those water patterns. So handing the mic back, other questions? Thank you, Reza.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Anybody else? Okay, I'm gonna say 1 and then 2.
Okay, here you go.
So one of the things that I appreciate about hearing from both Reza and Michelle is how they're using their educational backgrounds to support communities. And we have a group of students here, some of whom are involved in science. So I'd like first, perhaps Michelle and then Reza to speak to our students and how they might encourage students or guide students to use their educational backgrounds, whether it be science or urban development, to support communities.
So that's a great question and it's a hard question. My scientific background did include a lot of bench research and I actually enjoyed it quite a bit. Most people, you're either a bench scientist or you're an extrovert, supposedly, and I'm both. So it would shock people. Whit and I talked about how much I enjoyed that. Education, academic education should not be viewed as training. You can get into training programs and apprenticeships for that. Education should be viewed as acquisition of knowledge and building of relationships. And I think that's really how that has informed my career choices. And I think that would be my recommendation to everybody in the room, would be find your passion, but don't limit who you are or who you become to what you are learning in that classroom. Your charge once you graduate, or even if you don't graduate, because a lot of us don't, but your charge should really be to use the knowledge and the relationships, including your relationships with your professors and your classmates, to inform what you're doing right now based on what you learned in the classroom. That would be my recommendation, because the world is wide open. The world is wide open and there are all kinds of opportunities to really knuckle down and develop some expertise, not limited to a classroom, a corporation, a laboratory, an institution. So I think that's the best I could say. I've bounced all over the world doing my work, but not to the extent that Reza has. So I'm really interested in what Reza has to say about this, because his life is fascinating.
Thank you, Michelle. Just a couple, three points I wanted to mention. One is that what the students can do is, one of the things that they can do if they are interested in environmental justice cases. So they can use different, they have got assignments, they have got dissertations, they have got research projects. They can really choose one of these cases, and this could be used as a means, as a tool to get to know the communities and also get to know how the activism works on the communities, and they work on that. So this is one thing that they can do. The other thing is that they can also get involved in activism at the same time that they are students. So they can go into different NGOs because they take volunteers, they take, sometimes they are also paid to a small amount, but anyway, they can find a way to get involved in activism and to see how the activism works on the ground, what are the tensions, what are the problems, what are the issues. This is another thing. The other, probably the most important thing is that I normally distinguish between knowledge and science. And just to make an example, is the case of the review, the so-called independent review that UC Berkeley and UC San Francisco made, and you see the part of it in my film, is this the sometimes tension between knowledge and science. My understanding is that knowledge is with the community and they know everything and they are full of knowledge.
Yeah.
But the task of a researcher is to get to the community and try to get this knowledge from the community. But the science is something that you can find in labs at the university and so on. And in the case of this UC review, you can see that in many cases, the science did not help the community. And it was really a bad practice that we see people and my senior colleagues did there. And they thought that the idea was that they know the science and the science is going to help the community, but they didn't know that the knowledge is with community, and they really did very bad work in the way that they engage with community, they worked with community, and they collaborated with community, and you notice the results. And this is also part of it that was not in my field because it happened afterwards. All the panel members, or many of them, at least the head of panel members, regretted to get involved in that work, and they realized that the thing that they did was really a disservice to the community. And I also understood this from the beginning. I tried to make them aware of the way that they are approaching the community, but which was wrong from the beginning. But anyway, they believe that they have the science and they are going to help them, but they didn't have the science and they didn't have the knowledge. They had the science, but they didn't have the knowledge.
Was that for this project? I've missed it. Or another one? Are you talking about, I don't know if you can hear me, but was that for this project or another?
Yeah.
For this
Yeah.
project?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'm gonna take one more question, which is yours, just given that we're kind of working on a time limit here. Yeah, if you guys, Michelle's here, and I'm gonna give it to you.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
I want to know, since I don't know how long ago this film was made, but have there been any newer developments in the situation at Bayview-Hunters Point? Like, has been any what you would call like progress? Like, what happened to the Tetra Tech contract to clean up the Boot County fire? Has there been any progress or new development since this film has been made?
Okay, so probably again, Michelle can tell more about that, but I'm observing it from far during the last 2 years because of COVID and all these things. I was not directly involved, but I was watching the situation. So the progress is that after so they are making new plans for remediation. So there are different parcels, and I believe that parcel G, for example, one of the earliest one, and they are working on that. But it is going to take a lot of time because it is going to be much more difficult much more complicated than before to clean the land, also and get approval from all the agencies involved in that. I believe they are working on parcel G, and also they are preparing plans for other parcels. But my understanding is that it will take ages to do everything if really they can manage to do that. Parcel A is still, they are continuing construction, so because of the COVID, it was a little bit slowed down, but anyway, they are continuing it, and there are also a lot of lawsuits. So all the lawsuits, the recent one that I heard was the lawsuit between the community homeowners on parcel A and Lennar, which was a settlement which was completed just 2 or 3 weeks ago. But the other lawsuit is still in progress, and I really don't have any recent updates. So there shouldn't be any big progress in them. They are still in progress. So this is what I understand from the situation.
Thank you, Reza. I'm gonna give this to Michelle too.
So Reza summed up the broader updates. Yes, Lennar is still working on the view fire. With respect to the radiological cleanup stuff, there are basically three big engineering firms worldwide that are qualified and certified to do that kind of work. And Tetra Tech is one of them, and I can't remember the name just because I have so much swimming in my mind right now, but a second of the two actually worked on this site as well. And at that time in the early aughts, they actually had the largest federal action taken against them for their work around asbestos cleanup at the shipyard. But there's only 3 of them. So like every time something happens and you need to remove one, you reintroduce another one. So that firm that had that judgment against them by the federal government and that huge fine is actually who came in to do the oversight on the Tetra Tech mess. So we're just swapping back and forth bad faith things because there aren't any alternatives to the bad faith things. They are still working on the Butte fire. They also have several contracts with the city and county of San Francisco to do water sampling and monitoring for the San Francisco public utilities, which is our water treatment plant and our municipal power plant. So that basically is the update on that specific piece. They are continuing to dig, even though there's supposed to be a moratorium for, as Reza said, parcel A. And just recently, it was discovered that where they are taking background is the sampling you do to show what the environment should be like and set the standard for what you need to clean to. And it has been discovered that a lot of so the big controversy is the sandblasting and cleaning up the sandblast materials that they tried to use to actually scrape off and clean up all of the ships that were part of all of the research in the Pacific Theater, in the Bikini Atolls, etc. It has just been discovered about 8 months ago that a lot of that sandblast was taken to cement plants, and a lot of the asphalt that is there at the shipyard just down the street from here in Los Gatos, they use that sandblast material to create the materials for the cement and asphalt that they then brought back to the shipyard in the area that they are doing background on. San Francisco's health department and the Navy acknowledged has higher radiation levels for alpha and beta radiation than the rest of the shipyard site. So that's our background.
Yeah.
So we're reviewing that, but it was that particular announcement was a milestone for us because the health department finally acknowledged that there was a problem. And the representative that you saw in the film for the health department actually got tagged 2 years ago because she had been making cold call sales for the developers for Lennar 5 Points.
Whoa.
And yeah, to people who were, when people were hearing about what was happening, they were under contract to purchase units up there. The developer was actually having this health department representative call them to assure them that it was safe.
Wow.
She was taking it beyond even assuring them that it was safe and actually doing hard sale calls to them. And that came out. And
Wow.
as pretty as the mayor talked, the mayor defended her in that and has continued to promote this site, even though the mayor will not allow her own mother to move onto this site.
Wow.
So so for the health department after that incident to then show up and say, oh, by the way, where we're taking background is extremely contaminated and we need to go back and research this, that's a huge milestone for us in community. Because they have obfuscated this entire process from beginning to end for us. So
Can I ask one more quick question?
I'm here all day.
You're
Well, I'm
here.
here for a
Okay.
little
So
while,
everyone,
so yeah.
okay, we'll do that.
Okay, so I want to say thank you to Reza and Michelle so much for your contributions for this matter. Very heavy stuff, and it's great to be exposing this kind of thing to people like you in the audience. So I'm very grateful that you were both here to talk about this. And I have a little bit of housekeeping, and then I think, Reza, we're gonna just probably say goodbye because we're getting time here, but if you need to have a slip of attendance, please raise your hand, and my colleague Rebecca here is going to give them to you, all right? So anyway, to you both, thank you so much. Again, very powerful information. Thank you for doing what you do.
So what was your question?
I'd like to know, what would an equitable, just, democratic, happy ending look like for Hunters Point, in your opinion?
I mean, I can't really unpack that because there's a whole lot there that goes into that answer.
Hi.
Oh, very nice. But I will say that what we feel is the only safe thing to do with this parcel is to actually put some high uptake root plants in there and turn it into a forest. There's, you can't repair something that is going to be toxic for 600,000 years, right? Like if it has a 300,000 year half-life.
Is it 300,000 years?
There are a couple of the nuclides that have 300,000 year half-lives or 120,000 year half-lives.
That's right, that's how they date rocks.
Yeah,
Whoa.
so like plant some plants, let them lock this stuff into the plants as opposed to being in the soil or the water to make it safe for people to live next to it
Yeah.
and leave it alone.
And are you thinking like plant like a forest, but would people have to move out in the meantime?
I would not live there.
Okay.
Personally, I would not live there.
On the whole site or specific parcel?
I wouldn't live on the whole site. Like if you saw that map that a hemp supporter Sunshine had, yeah, with like pieces of gray all over it. Like, so there were these big blocks of gray, right?
Yeah.
But if you really looked at that thing, there were just specks of gray all over it that were toxic.
Yeah.
So I would,
You would turn the whole thing like
into a forest, yeah. I would be looking to move, monitor, and actually cover healthcare for all of the
Yeah,
people who are
that's what
on
I
the
was
fence
thinking
line
too.
still in public housing.
Yeah.
Because the main people who are most exposed are the people, until very recently, who have the least resources and had no alternatives.
Right.
So, you know, we had the head of population health, the county medical officer, making a statement, as well as our air quality management district, making a statement about these people are not sick because of the environment. These people are sick because of income and
They made that
genetics.
statement.
Oh, yeah, no, and we're shocked that I was calling them out on it because they're like, well, income is like social determinants, and I'm like, yeah, but what you're saying is we're choosing to live next to this stuff. Have you seen real estate costs in the Bay Area? Like, these people can't
pick up and go somewhere else. Like you can't move. What do you,
Exactly.
yeah, they're exposed to this bad. You're saying it's not the environment, but you're also acknowledging they're exposed to this bad environment and they're not choosing to leave. Where are they gonna go?
What happens if now there are new people who have more economic resources,
Well,
right?
so
And
here's
now
the
what's
thing.
how's the story changing?
No, they still haven't changed that narrative because those statements were made on camera when I wasn't there. The one time it happened to be on camera when I was there, I said, okay, so wait a minute. The neighborhood is now 42% Asian, 38% Latino, 10% white and 10% black. So the genetics are fundamentally different, and the Latino and Asian populations are having the same health outcomes as we have. So let's just call the genetics argument bullshit, because the genetics are different, right? Like there's not the same. You're gentrifying. So right before the pandemic, and for renters, our neighborhood was the third most expensive neighborhood in the city to rent. Right before the pandemic, it's back to being down below. So I'm like, so the income is totally different and higher, and we're still having the same health outcomes. So now what is your excuse?
Yeah.
And their response was, why are you calling us racist? Because we're just talking about social determinants. And I was like, but the social determinants have fundamentally changed with the new populations, with the added income and wealth. And we still have the same health outcomes. Within one generation, you're seeing the same rates of diabetes, heart disease, obesity among the Latino and Asian populations that you have with the Black population. It's not a lifestyle choice, it's not a cultural thing, and it's not a genetic thing. At this point, why can't you acknowledge and address? And isn't that your job as a population health specialist for the county, Department of Public Health? So yes, I'm waiting for that response too. They haven't changed that attitude. They just stopped talking about it.
Wow.
Yeah.
So I know I mentioned earlier in the film that someone briefly talked about Treasure Island. Do you know if that has anything to do with the?
They have finally broken those two things apart, but the shipyard got, our shipyard in Hunters Point got designated a Superfund site. When Treasure Island finally got turned over to developers and started being developed, they just kind of couched it under our specific Superfund site number so that they were kind of the exact same project. In 2010 or 2011, so anytime you have a Superfund site, you're supposed to have a restoration advisory board.
What does that mean real quick? Superfund site?
A Superfund site, so there are two levels of extreme contamination on sites due to industrial human uses. One is a brownfield site and one is a Superfund site. Superfund is the most toxic. It is not suitable for humans or any animals to live on whatsoever. And the legislation says that the people responsible for creating that level of contamination are also responsible for the cost of cleanup. And as you're going through the cost of cleanup, the levels of cleanup or what will be acceptable for reaching your end limit of cleanup falls to what is called a restoration advisory board. And it's made up of government officials, industry, academic advisors, and the actual community in place. So the shipyard had RAB as is required by the law for Superfund sites up until 2010. And then the Navy went to Congress. So you actually have to go, because this is a federal law, you have to go to Congress to change the makeup of the RAB. The Navy went to Congress and actually got the RAB for Hunters Point Shipyard disbanded, which is technically illegal. Treasure Island does have a RAB of its own. And one of the ways that they got away with us not having a RAB is by saying, oh, they're under the same Superfund number. So there is a RAB for this. They're different parcels. They have different kinds of contamination on them. I mean, there are almost no military outposts, no United States military outposts all over the world that aren't deeply contaminated. And if you don't even have to scratch the surface very hard to find stories of the VA settling or monitoring people because they were posted to a base and got exposed to something, right? So yeah, Treasure Island has a lot of bad stuff. Almost all of the nuclear propulsion engines that you see all over the world are based on research out of the shipyard. And because we had in the Bay Area the largest dry docks for the western coast of the United States, almost all of the submarines and aircraft carriers that were run by engines that were run on nuclear fuel were stationed at Treasure Island at some point in time.
Well,
Even after the Hunters Point shipyard closed down, Treasure Island was still servicing those ships. So there is some radiological waste at Treasure Island, but that is not the predominant contamination there. It is a very toxic site that is going to require a lot of cleanup. And Tetra Tech is actually to your point, Tetra Tech is actually on contract to help clean that stuff up as well. So who knows what is actually there and what is not, but basically, yeah, that's
You
Treasure Island.
surmise it to be primarily like fuel related and asbestos related? Like when you say there's a lot of toxic stuff, it could be anything, right?
I would not even say it's fuel related per se. I would say that's part of the mix. I would say that that's part of the mix. What are they treating their clothes with? What are they treating the ships with to keep them preserved? What other kinds of explosives or
Chemical weapons, whatever.
chemical weapons? We don't do biological weapons in our country, but we have done several types of chemical weapons that have turned into industrial pesticides, right? All of that is there. All of that is there. Oh, wait, one, two, three. I got you.
I just wanted to like clarify, I don't want to like paint them as like some Disney like villain sort of thing, but it's like Tetra, Tetra Tech, and then like the department for like residency, are they just kind of this cycle of like kind of like and then you build and then you just kind of keep going until eventually we.
So absolutely, across the entire nation, there are developments in Florida with cancer clusters where they used to be former military bases or munition stores for the military, and Tetra Tech was responsible for cleaning them up, and they didn't. And so there's lawsuits all over Florida for that. Tetra Tech is one of the engineering firms that is supposed to go in. And so for certain classes of naval ships, you have to hire engineering firms to go in and clean them up because they require so many different kinds of basically treatments, et cetera, on the inside. Plus you do have to refuel. So you have to take stuff out and put stuff in, or for nuclear propulsion engines, et cetera. And Tetra Tech is on file for doing that kind of work for the Navy across the country. And I want to say
There have been a couple of like regular old podcasts that you can listen to about some of the horrific incidents where Tetra Tech did a really poor job on a really big, expensive ship and cost the lives of actual seamen or their own employees because of the sloppy work that they do.
That's crazy because my whole family is Navy.
Mine is too.
Right.
Like my
So
grandpa, my uncle, I have tons of cousins,
it's so
like,
crazy.
yeah. So, yeah, and what are you gonna do? Because, so we actually got the furthest out of anybody who has been harmed by Tetra Tech in that we got 2 hearings with the radiological, the NRC.
Nuclear Regulatory Commission.
Thank you, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, to get them decertified. But they never actually got decertified because there's only 3 of them. So what is the alternative? If you can show an alternative, that might have happened, but it would cause harm to the larger society to take them. And then, okay, so I don't,
To your question?
yeah, well, number one, what is your name?
Jared.
Terry?
Jared.
Jared. Okay. What's your question? Sorry.
So if it's this kind of like radioactive waste with like long half-lives and other potential pollutants are in the ground, in possibly even in the water, it's all content, like the ground itself is the ground itself is contaminated at this point. Is there even like an even like possible to clean it up?
No, so before you guys joined us, what I was
Yeah, that's-
discussing was the fact that I think the only solution is to turn it into a forest, to plant some plants that have rapid uptake for the specific chemicals that we're talking about, so that you can lock them out of the soil. I think that's the only solution, and just leave it alone for, until probably will be long past our time on this earth. Maybe even hopefully will be long past our time on this earth, because I think you just have to lock it up.
But of course, as like the people who are living there is kind of the end game, like to try and prove that there is to prove that there is harm being caused, and be able to like get them the help to allow the people who are living there, get them the help to move. Is that kind of the?
I mean, that's my preference. That is what I think needs to happen. On top of, because there are people living there who don't have the resources to move, locking it up. Because like I said, the soil shifts, the soil ends up airborne. The water table goes up and down, and that moves it from here to there to here to there in the soil. And like the only way that you really keep it in place, I think, is to lock it into some plants, and then pray to God that those plants don't catch fire.
Yeah.
Like I think that's it. We can move people as much as we want, but San Francisco has number one, we have some areas that are some of the most densely populated in the whole United States in San Francisco, right? And we're building up so that we can increase that density right now. There is no appetite for actually removing housing. That shouldn't be there, unfortunately, right now. Although I have talked to our supervisor, they did do some studies that were meant to make the people who are already on parcel A whole if they wanted to sell. But the plan was to make them whole, as in buy them out, and then sell those already existing units that are on that land to investors who would then Airbnb them.
Whoa.
So then you would have tourists coming in
I mean,
So-
And
just
if
have-
they're not living there long-term, they have no
short-term.
idea that they're being exposed to this crap and it's, you know, so there is no political appetite from bottom to top
Mhm.
to actually remove people from this site and look towards safety.
Mhm.
When I say bottom to top, Dianne Feinstein's husband was one of the earliest investors. This plan was their plan.
Oh,
So there's a Bloom Feinstein plan.
oh.
She is on the record in 1980 making a comment when she was talking about building this shipyard site. And someone said, well, you know, you're talking about this bedroom community for wealthy older people and jet setters, et cetera. Where exactly do families with kids fit into your vision? And Dianne Feinstein is on videotape in like 79, 80 saying, children have no business in San Francisco. We're not building San Francisco for families.
Wow.
And that was specifically a quote about this shipyard that still hasn't been built yet. On top of that, Nancy Pelosi's husband has invested 3 times in this. We're talking about a project that has about $5 trillion worth of foreign investment in it. So nobody wants to roll it backwards because how do you make all of those people who have invested all of those trillions, not millions, not billions, trillions of dollars, how do you make them whole?
There's no place in the city that has that amount of open land.
No.
right? There's nothing, right?
No, our
Yeah.
neighborhood is it.
Mhm.
Like, you know, so, and the actual ordinance, it's a law that was negotiated for this project is that the Navy cleans the land up. Once the engineers certify that the land is clean, the city takes possession, the city then passes the land directly on to the developers. And the agreement with the developers and the money has already exchanged hands. We, the city and county of San Francisco, sold this land to those developers for $1. For $1. And in that contract, for that $1 that we have already accepted, we actually have to pay for all of the infrastructure
Mhm.
for this entire project.
Mm.
So Lennar Five Points has very minimal capital investment into the project directly. And they've already sold $5 trillion worth of shares.
Which they're
Well,
benefiting their country.
Where's that money, where's that $1 trillion in investment going if if Lennar themselves hasn't been investing any money into the developing it?
Goes in
yet?
Russian yachts, man.
So one of the women who was working for Bicycle Coalition, and then she was working for Parks, she's a Brazilian woman, brilliant. In the film, there was this thing where it was like shipyard development launch party or something like that. And, you know, you could go in and see the units, and there was this festival with DJs that went on for 2 days. And this Brazilian woman was like, holy shit, just, you know how much money they're making off of this project if you're looking at this grand opening in which they probably spent about $10 million to throw a community party. There were food trucks, like all of the food was free. There were these 5-star DJs that normally do like the Warriors games with laser light shows and like a smog machine. We're outside on the bay and they bring a fog machine that they don't start spewing fog for until 10 o'clock at night. I mean, like, it's just ridiculously wasteful.
It just, like, I mean, I understand this is maybe, like, I'm not an accountant and I don't, like, and it's still kind of like trillions of, even if they spend 10 million, $10 million, like over $10 million on a ridiculous party for like an open house for this development that they're planning to make. But I'm not sure has been made yet. And they have trillions of dollars of
This is the thing though, like you're going exactly where all of us are going, like
Like,
this
where
is
do
the
all the money
ridiculousness
go?
of this project. So there are units there. The studio townhouses go for about $1.2 million, 800 square feet. And they do have 3 and 4 bedroom ones, so you figure out the math on how much those are. I toured one of the 1-bedroom apartments, which was about 600 square feet, and they were asking $3,800 a month for that. So they're there, and those are the early projects to prove the model. So those are cheaper than what's going to be there permanently if they're ever allowed to build. One of the UC physicians that my organization works really close with around environmental health issues was called in by the community liaison for 5 Points, Lennar, the developers, just to tell you how wacko this whole project is. This woman sits down with this UC doctor who is working on environmental health in our community. And she says, hey, so I am basically the community liaison and real estate agent for this project. And we have all this, and she lays out how many millions to invest in the community. This community has been divested in for years and years. And we have the opportunity to really grow some businesses in the Black and Latino community in this neighborhood. And, da, 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 da. And let me just tell you that my mother died of breast cancer when she was 48. So I understand the environmental health concerns of the neighborhood because I'm a victim of it. But do you understand how much money and better lives you are holding up by not saying this is safe and letting us go forward? And she really thought that this doctor who specializes in colon cancer was going to turn around and be like, oh, that's okay. Let's, I'll sign up on it and go ahead and invest all this stuff in killing people. Like, she really thought that that was going to be the outcome of this conversation and was shocked that it wasn't.
Well, I
So
think
she was the one who said that her mother died of breast cancer.
Even though her mother died of breast cancer, she thinks the investment into the community moving back onto this toxic land was greater than people losing their mothers when they are 13 and 14 to breast cancer.
It's just the perfect,
The mayor of San Francisco wouldn't let her mother live
Literally,
there, but she
literally.
said it
So
was
her
safe to
mother,
keep it
so
still
there are so many low income units on the area. And right now we are moving away from a public housing complex model and moving everybody onto Section 8. Do you guys know what Section 8 is? So their housing certificates, you can go to any kind of housing that would accept this certificate, and the federal government will actually pay 3/4 of the rent for you. So San Francisco is moving towards that model. We're not going to have public housing anymore, supposedly, or we will have mixed use, wealthy people along with the public housing complexes or inside of them. Her mom qualified, and I guess somebody in City Hall did some illegal stuff to move her mother up the list because they thought, oh, having her mom here will prove this is a safe place to live. So they offered her mother a unit there. And the mayor actually cussed them out and was like, don't you ever, you're not going to kill my mother. This shit is so toxic. I'm not going to go anywhere near it. Da-da-da-da-da. So yeah, she's out there touting this stuff, but she's not letting her mother or her sister move in there.
back to your conversation about the real estate agent and, speaking with the doctor, I think the reason that that person expected that conversation to come out as, okay, I will sign on the dotted line, is because of how many people up and down the chain have signed on the dotted line, right? It is, they're making basically an economic argument versus a life argument, right? You're normalizing death making because there's so much money sloshing around.
And that is the case with almost everything we do in environmental justice, is the argument is how many jobs
Mhm.
or what is the economic cost to industry versus actually protecting the environment. And it always comes down to that. So absolutely, but I mean, it's just the visuals of this conversation when it got back to me. I mean, there's one Black woman talking to another Black woman,
Mhm.
both of whom have very direct, intimate experiences with cancer in the Black community and how harmful it is. And for one of them to have that narrative,
Mhm.
and for her to be the one who was most drastically affected by the cancer, and she still thinks that the economic argument is more powerful than life or quality of life arguments.
This is capitalism.
Mhm.
This is literally what it is. It's built to be like this.
Also, like, when we help protect and benefit the environment, economy also benefits.
Right.
Like,
Mhm.
Absolutely.
like, I want to go into environmental economics. That's my goal after, like, with my degree. But, you know, just kind of like the environmental services that we get from having sections of environment, like, if, you know, your proposal / idea of, like, you know, foresting the area, that would benefit just the locals so much, cleaner air, it's filtering out pollutants, it's also going to be like a protection from like any kind of storms and like droughts and things, are like, it's going to benefit so much. But it's so unfortunate that like so many people like in higher government have invested so much money to this, because this narrative happens all the time, and it's frustrating. I've never heard about this until like today. So like I've grown up in the Bay Area, like we go to SF all the time, like passing by that
I
all the time.
literally said before
Yeah, I have.
So, yeah, it's crazy.
Well,
I'm
I'll
sure
come back to that. You had a question though. and I-
Yeah, so mine was like, in general, with the cleanup itself, you said the Navy was responsible for it. When you say they're cleaning up the radiation, like what are they actually doing with treatment? Or are they actually taking the dirt out? Can you explain a bit more on that?
I am gonna come back to what you guys were saying, because that is, that whole capitalism thing is another thing. Here's the dilemma for environmental justice activists all over the world. And one of the reasons I'm saying we need to just reforest this place, for something like nuclear radiation, there is no injecting something into the soil or running something over the air to clean it up. It's there until it's gone. So cleanup means digging it all up and moving it to somewhere else and storing it there. We, in my organization, believe in and preach a fundamental, a fanatical almost adherence to the environmental justice principles, which for us means that we don't think it's moral or ethical or right to dig that up and move that to a place with a community with less political power than we have, because we recognize that we have a lot of access and political power. You know, moving it to some indigenous reservation in Utah or Nevada is not equitable. Moving it back to the Bikini Atolls is not equitable at all to us. What would be an ecologically responsible thing to do and a socially and morally responsible thing to do would be to lock this stuff up and let nature handle it, because what has been discovered over the years at that site and all of its progeny sites is that you cannot clean up nuclear waste. You just can't. It does what it's going to do. And there's fundamentally no way to neutralize it. So
if you move it out, say if you take it to like Utah, I mean, it's gonna be someone else's problem now.
It literally is,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
someone else usually does not have the ability to hold accountability for that step. We have been, as Reza said, for this particular site and this particular development, we have had enough clout to actually stop this thing from happening for 30 years.